Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm joined with Goosebumps enthusiast, aka Bruce, and we have a adult movie review, which is unorthodox for this channel. But hear me out. We're doing this on this channel just for the fact that this is an adult parody of Goosebumps, and it's a movie centered around the idea and the nostalgia of Goosebumps. So take that with a grain of salt as well. This will have some cursing in this review because this is an adult movie. If you are used to the wholesome content that's on my channel, um, please be warned before we go any further, okay? So, we have decided to review Shingles the movie. Now, if you're not familiar with what Shingles is a lowbrow adult parody of Goosebumps. It has 60 books in the collection, if I'm not mistaken, and you can find all of them on Amazon. And they have various authors. And it appears that the creators of this series have a podcast here on YouTube called Authors and Dragons. By no means is this an attack on those specific people. We are just judging this film on its own basis. We're not making this a personal attack to the creators or anything. But me and Bruce have a lot to say about this movie. Off the bat, Bruce, how are you doing today? And why don't you get us started on your thoughts on the Shingles movie?
Um, Today I am doing pretty alright, I guess. I just got a massive package from you, actually, so stay tuned for an unboxing, hopefully soon. Um, I guess I'll just get straight into this, because this thing was I'm just gonna say it right now. It's a mess. This, hands down, right off the bat, is the absolute worst movie I have ever seen in my life. Like, nothing even comes close to it, and that's shocking. All right. For the sake of this review, we're also going to be comparing this to other horror films, even though this is hard to even consider one. And I think the perfect thing to compare this to is the Creep Show movies. Now, what's so similar about it? What you would say? Well, they each have their own segments, and with Creep Show, it kind of breaks the movie down into little, I guess you could call them episodes, if you will, of different stories, and that's what it kind of tries to do here. Because they obviously aren't just going to adapt one Shingles book; they're going to adapt multiple. Now, here's the thing. In my opinion, not to go off into a tangent here, but Creepshow 1 and 2 are fantastic. Creepshow 3, on the other hand, I considered for the long time the worst movie I had ever seen. It was a mess of a film. It didn't even feel like they tried. And although I still think that is very much right down this little slippery slope of just terrible films that you should never experience, this thing, ladies and gentlemen, outdoes that by 10. And this, just by personal experience, was one of the just absolutely agonizing things I just have ever seen. And although I want to get straight to thoughts about each segment, I also have to say that there's a lot of reviewers kind of going around over this movie, because this is a recent film, guys. It's only about a year old from what I know. And the reviewers are just really, really obnoxious and just kind of, I guess, if you want to call them edge lords, they kind of are, because there's moments in this film that, and this is hard to even consider a spoiler because I don't want you guys to watch this movie, but there are moments in this film where you have very racist jokes, and although that shouldn't matter in most cases, they're specifically attacking a group of people, and that's where I kind of draw the line. Things like South Park, although sometimes it even gets a little bit too, edgy, I feel like that can sometimes use it well and have funny jokes where you just like you kind of force yourself to laugh. You're like, oh my god. But in this case, it is the exact opposite. There is jokes about Afghanistan's, for example, and what these reviewers are saying is that who cares? If you think that that is offensive, you should go fuck off. And it's like, What are you talking about here? I mean, we are talking about jokes that if someone of that group might be offended by, I still don't think that's like a good thing at all. And I just wanted to get that straight out of the way that the reviewers are terrible. And they also very clearly demonstrate that they are in full support of this movie and they're kind of almost being, I'm not going to say paid, but also uh, kind of backwards supported by making these reviews. You'll see the creator of this movie commenting on all of them, saying, "Thanks, I love that you liked it," all this stuff. And it just got on my nerves a really whole lot of times after watching this thing. And, you know, I guess I'll just pass this to completionist because we're gonna review this segment by segment. Um, what did you think of the first segment? I think from what I remember it was like hands up my ass or something. I can't remember.
I think there was the opening thing was technically the first one, and that was like about the teenager telling off his parents and the zombie thing. I guess we could start there instead of
Oh
the
yeah.
hands in my ass story. But to kind of build off what you said before we get into that, you know, I don't mind having different tastes, out there with media. There are people out there that just have the bar set so low, or they're really into very lowbrow IPs, or they're into lowbrow entertainment. And I can see that this movie is aware to an extent of what it's trying to be. And if you're into that, I'm not going to pigeonhole anything against you. Um, but also, what I've noticed is that there's a lot of shit posting going on the internet where people are giving this movie very high ratings on apps and stuff, but you can clearly tell that it's a shit post. Or you have people openly saying they were financial backers on like Indiegogo of this movie, praising the songs and telling people to go watch it. And that to me seems kind of slanted because you're not really getting the full truth of what a mainstream audience can do. Now, granted, this movie was made with next to no budget. This movie was made with no A-list celebrities. I mean, to even call these people actors that perform in this movie is kind of a stretch. And like I said, I'm not trying to attack anybody when I say that, but I'm not mad at the product per se. I'm more upset with the quality of it because, in my opinion, if you're going to do an adult parody spoof in the spirit of Mad Magazine or Cracked Magazine, these famous spoof magazines that can be adult humor focused, or even there's a YouTube video where R.L. Stine works with Funny or Die, where he comes up with adult titles for books. Those have humor in it because there's some awareness. As in this, I feel like it's trying to be so overboard and so edge lord that it doesn't make it fun to experience, more so than you're almost forced in a situation where you have to observe it like art. You know what I mean? Like this is like, and I don't like saying that movies are art, but this feels in the same vein as something like a Freddy Got Fingered. If you've ever seen that comedy movie where the creator said he didn't want to make a movie, but he made a movie because they kept pestering him, so he just wrote whatever. And it was, the way he described it was like, this is a troll on the audience and the middle fingers to them for wanting to see a movie by him. And I feel like this is also an aware troll type of movie where it's almost like anti-art, Dadaist art, that's what it's called. And because it's aware, I can't fully say that it's the worst thing I've ever seen. I think there are two films that I've seen that aren't aware of how bad they are, and they pretty much deliver a similar product. Um, but it's down there with my least favorite films. And to give you an idea of what you're going to expect, the opening scene to this movie is a spoof of the Goosebumps '90s intro, and they're trying their best with a low budget song. And while I think that's kind of fun to kick off the movie, the first segment will definitely get you in the headspace of what this movie is like. You have this kid who is like a video game nerd, and he's into games and all that, and the zombie apocalypse breaks out on the news, and he takes it like, yes, it's my time to shine now because I've been training for this my whole life. So he goes off, cusses off his parents, and says, hey, look, I go by my gamer tag now. You can't call me by my name. And the parents are just aloof and just completely moronic for the sake of it. And he starts to go outside and kill zombies because he's been preparing for this on video games. And yeah, it's a really dumb segment. Not the worst, but you can get a sense of what kind of humor they're going for. And then once it cuts out of that segment, we get introduced to four main characters that, are sharing their stories around a campfire outside of a strip club. Yes, outside of a strip club, a titty bar. And they're waiting for their camp counselor, who is known to do like drugs and drink and, do all these terrible things. And they're kind of acting like the Midnight Society from Are You Afraid of the Dark? So they're also spoofing Are You Afraid of the Dark here, because the idea is they carry around these Shingles books and they throw them into the campfire in a very low budget way. And the first story is told by this guy wearing glasses, and it's like something called the Hands in My Ass or something, and it's a spoof of Night of the Living Dummy. Okay, there is a dummy in this movie called Sloppy, right? And it's a parody of Slappy, obviously here. Very low budget. They just picked up a random dummy from a shop and put a mustache on him, and they call him Sloppy here. The core idea of the story is a boy keeps going to like a talent show or like a gig in town, trying to get his good start in his career to get famous, but nobody finds him funny. He's like a struggling comedian. So he goes to his dad asking him for advice, and his dad gives him a dummy. And very soon he realizes that this dummy's alive. Now, you might think, okay, that's not too bad of an idea. No, it gets worse. There's a scene when they first start interacting where Sloppy forces the guy to stick his hand up his butt, okay? And there is sound effects, it's wet, it is played for sexual humor, like Sloppy's enjoying it, telling him to go deeper, and yeah, and the guy's really uncomfortable, and you can tell that this is sort of like an R-word situation where he's being forced against his will to do this. And after that gross scene, you see a montage of him going to these events with Sloppy, trying some new material, and then Sloppy's like, well, I have the idea that's going to make you famous. And the climax of the story involves the guy taking laxatives, going on stage, and crapping his pants and barfing in the crappiest effects possible to get some notoriety. And then there's a twist of the story where you realize that the whole point of this was to get internet meme famous, and there's a recontextualization of the whole event. It's played for humor, and it's not that funny. Actually, the only funny point about this whole segment, and I think Bruce might agree, is that there's this whole tension building up throughout the story. And by the time you get to the laxative stuff in the climax, you're almost forced to laugh because there's no alternative. You can't cry, you can't cringe. You just got to laugh at how dumb the story is. And maybe that's what they're going for. And I was like, maybe that this is the type of movie that they're going for the low-hanging fruit. But they just didn't manage to make that the consistency of the story. And Bruce, I kind of want you to add on to this segment with your thoughts, because I hated this one, but I don't hate it as much as some other ones here. I think this is definitely a bad story, but it's not the worst, if that makes any sense.
Okay, so I'm just gonna get straight into this, honestly. I'm gonna skip over that kind of inner looping segment thing with Johnny Headshot or whatever his name is. Because that is honestly just unnecessary, and you could skip them at your own ease. They honestly add nothing. But for Hands Up My Ass, this story was horrendous. And I say that because not once did I laugh throughout this entire thing until, like you said, the very end, where like you have no alternative. You're just like, you have gone through, I think this segment was like 40 damn minutes too. Like that's a lot of time. 40 minutes from what I remember. And you basically are just sitting through just plain old torture. Like I'm not even kidding you. This is torture. Just for this guy to start puking and it looks like it's coming out of his nose because the effects are just so bad. But I kind of want to go back to, the R word scene. Y'all, this is immediately where just the edgy stuff just completely ruins whatever potential it had me to laugh at. Now, stick your hand up my you know what, fine. That can work. You might get a chuckle from a few people who are just absolutely nonsensical, but then you kind of have sloppy, and I shared this in the Discord because I just thought it was so awfully ridiculous. Saying for him to do some stuff that is just not cool. And like, of course, this guy feels uncomfortable. Guys, rape, marital rape, I'm just gonna say that word. Very big issues, and especially just all over the world, honestly. Um, it should not be joked around about. I'm sorry if some people find that funny. I don't find that cool at all. That's actually probably the worst humor the movie gets at, I guess. And this was around the time that I just knew that as soon as the segment was done, I had to turn it off. But here's the thing. We're only 10, 15 minutes into this one. And this thing is 40 minutes. So, as the story goes on, like you said, Sloppy kind of trying to help this comedian out, it just gets kind of cringy at moments. And it's like, okay, dude, this is just taking forever. And there's a lot of padding out the runtime as well. Uh, Sorry if there's a plane in the background. But it just pads out so much runtime, which is so unnecessary because this movie is 2 hours long. If this thing was like an hour and 20 minutes, I'd be like, okay, fine. I can see why they're trying to do it. There's nothing to work with. Well, that's the case. There's nothing to work with. And when you have nothing to work with for 2 hours, you feel like you're being tortured. Like, this was one of the worst things I have ever seen, like this segment alone, and we're one into them. That is some really, really like World Guinness Records level stuff right there. I could not stand this segment. Once again, I dead serious. The only time I laughed, and I felt like I was about to like start crying laughing because it was just so awful, was the puking scene. He starts, crapping his pants with all these really bad sound effects, and then he goes, "I'm peeing too." It's so bad. All right, it's not, it's hard to even laugh out now going back to it because it's just like, why? And the thing that I hate to say, this was the best one, and I gave it a 0 out of 10.
I gave it, like it's down there with like Creepshow 3 level cringe, but I don't hate this one as much because it would be down there, but like when I think about Creepshow 3 segments and why I hate those so much is that I really feel like the writers tried to give a shit there, and here they literally just are trying to make the most crash shit possible. And I probably would give this maybe like a 2 out of 10, maybe a 1 out of 5. Like it's for an adult story, I've seen worse. I've seen worse. It wasn't too terribly boring. It did have that sloggy moment. It's not as egregious as the second segment of how long that one is, majority of the movie. But compared to the other ones, it's probably my favorite. Two, is not a lot to compare, which leads to the second story, which this one I think is the longest segment of the whole movie. It's like the college alien kegger story. Not only
Yeah.
is this story boring, but it's also the setup of like a C tier porno, but it never fully commits to it. It's just a slog. And this feels like the torture of the movie. I had to at one point 2 times speed watch this middle segment because I just got so uninterested. I'm like, okay, let's just see what happens, and nothing ended up happening. So you had these two idiots in college looking to have a party and typical crap, and they meet this strange woman, and the strange woman, of course, is not anywhere close to being somewhat of a relatable human, which should be a hint. And the two bozos somehow lucked themselves into a bunch of hot aliens, these two dumbasses, and they spend the whole segment just partying with these aliens and doing nothing. It's almost like that coming of age college comedy movie in the 80s. But imagine if the whole movie was literally just the two bozos partying and there's no story, no plot. It's just nonsense the entire segment. That's what this is. This is more offensively dumb than even the first segment because at least the first segment has some tangibility of a story there. This one doesn't have anything going for it. Honestly, I hate this one vehemently. This is like one of the worst anthology segments I have ever watched in my life. And Bruce, I want to hear your thoughts on this one.
Going back to what you said about coming of age stories, have y'all seen Fast Times at Ridgemount High? Well, that's what this is. Oh wait, don't get your expectations too high. This is it, but it fucking sucks. And it has tons of really bad horror elements in it. Oh my god, where do I even begin? This I still wouldn't say is the worst. I have to save that for the next one here, but my god. It's hard to joke about. I mean, at this point, at least with the hands up my ass story, at least it feels like they're making at least an attempt to kind of reach that like Jeff Dunham kind of humor, which I'm sorry, I'm guilty of this. I actually think he's kind of funny. I know. I'm a hypocrite. I don't care. He actually can deliver some jokes. With this, it's like it's so incredibly bad. I don't have to restate the plot for you guys, but this segment is so boring. It's so boring. And like you said, it feels like you're watching, and I haven't even watched porn before, guys. I'm actually fucking serious. This feels like you're watching it. I've seen movies that kind of get to that level of like softcore kind of stuff, and this is like right there with it. I'm not even kidding you. Um, this reminds me of some of the worst things I have ever seen in my life. I'm not a massive fan of sci-fi, so you can already see how that influences my score. So having a really bad story with it is like just even more out of this world. And if I'm being real, all right, these characters in this segment are the worst in the entire movie. I still wouldn't say it's the worst story, if I'm being frank, but my god, was this a drag to get through. Um, do I have any positives? No. I didn't laugh once throughout this whole segment. I didn't laugh once throughout the third one, but you know, it's just I have nothing to say. There's no words for this segment. I mean, it's so bad and boring and just plain that once you actually get to the whole like plot central idea, it's just like what am I watching? And I'm not even kidding you. I put it on 1.5 times speed. Yeah, I actually did that too. I didn't even know you did that, but I actually did too. There was a point in the movie at that party scene, my guy, and that was when I was like, screw this, and I just picked up the remote and put it on 1.5 speed because my god, uh, I would have put it on times 2 if I'm being honest, but I didn't want the characters to sound like mice. So this was horrendous on so many levels. I don't even have anything else to say. I mean, talk about one of the worst things I have ever seen in my entire life. It might even be worse than the lawn gnome one, but I still think I'd have to rate the lawn gnome one better. I mean, sorry, worse somehow. final score 0 out of 10. I'm not even kidding with you guys. I mean that. I mean even Creepshow 3 in my opinion has higher ratings than that. Like I think one of the Creepshow 3 segments had like a 0.5 for me, which is like already like, that's not good. But oh man, this one was really rough. And it's so unapologetic. That's the thing, is that there's nothing to make up for any of this. It just feels like they're doing this out of their own sick like entertainment. And I feel like the director probably thinks this is just like the funniest thing that someone has ever seen, but he doesn't know that this is like the most terrible stuff I've ever seen in my life. At least the interlooping segments. Although, no offense to James Rolfe from Angry Video Game Nerd, I like some of those videos. If I'm being honest, I'm not even a video game fan, but it almost feels like he wrote some of it. So I'm like, okay, fine. You know, I didn't laugh once at any of the stuff in that interlooping part, but it feels like something is still there that's like just kind of over the top ridiculous, where I can still like kind of smile at it at points. Though it's still just awful. And this, at this point in the movie, I had to stop again. I had to stop this movie 3 times. And I'm telling you guys, if it hasn't made you abundantly clear by now, I know some people love to watch bad movies because they're like, well, you said it's so bad, now I gotta watch it. Do not watch it. Like, it's that awful. I'm not kidding with you. There's movies that I've seen, like Creepshow 3, where I'm like, don't watch it, And I'm like, okay, fine. If they want to watch it, at your own risk. This is just so bad that I can't recommend this to even like white trash RV families that will probably for some reason like this. Like, it's seriously going back to what I said, Fast Times or something, like a great movie, kinda in my opinion, but just way worse. And also like, you thought that was raunchy, all that like teen 80s stuff. Y'all, this is like 5 times worse. Like that already shows you just like, oh man. And here's the thing. All right, you can have adult parodies to Goosebumps, all right? But why so much of this stuff? I mean, it's a kids book series. If you're making fun of something that is already made fun of a lot, I can be like, okay, fine, yeah, that's kind of hilarious. Like, people make fun of Barney for some reason. I'm like, okay, fine. I can see somebody like laughing at that, like, oh yeah, I never watched that show. That was lame. Goosebumps is something so many people grew up with, and all these reviewers, by the way, clearly don't know that this is a Goosebumps ripoff. They don't. They're like, you know that one part in the beginning? That was a reference to The Exorcist. No, it was literally just the dog eyes from the original TV show opening. That's all it is. The Goosebumps ripoff, except so incredibly like, I don't even use this word that much, but inappropriate. That's literally what it is, and just distasteful. That it's hard to even consider this like a comedy. It just feels like you're watching like, is this like torture porn in a way?
Well, like my previous comment, I said it's more like anti-art. They're trying to be anti-artistic. They're trying to make the most outlandish thing to make you either pissed off, uncomfortable, or a combination of both. That's why I compared it to Freddy Got Fingered, because that movie literally does the exact same thing that this movie does in terms of its humor delivery and its joke delivery. It's that uncomfortably crass and just vulgar for the sake of it. That's why I think this movie is kind of aware. But even then, there's so many other stories. I was looking through the whole database of the books that they had, and some of these ideas actually sound kind of fun. If I'm not lying here, some of these ideas sound kind of fun. My favorite one was Slaughter Time on Giggle, or is it Slaughter on Giggle Time Mountain? That has like a killer bunny mascot story with, it's like a slasher in like an abandoned amusement park. I'm like, if they had a bigger budget, they could adapt better sounding stories than this Kegger one, which is just a nothing burger. And here's the thing. We're reviewing this without ever reading a single Shingles book. I'm not saying there isn't a good Shingles story out there, potentially in the books. I'm not saying that there isn't, because I can't say and speak on that. But given this, it kind of shows that they picked the ones with the most shoestring budget possible to get it made. And I hope that if people actually like these books, that the book would be way better in comparison to this segment, because this segment was just fucking awful. When I have to fast forward through it, my first time watching it, just to get it over with, you fucked up. It's that bad. Which brings me to segment 3. Now, I've already said this. I think the first one with the hands in my ass one probably is the best one. But for me, in enjoyability, this story reminded me of a segment from Creepshow 3 called The Professor's Wife, where it's so egregiously dumb and so just over the top that it's kind of funny. And I think that if they did have one saving grace, in my opinion, in this film, it would be this cocaine gnome one. I don't even know the title of the story, but it involves a gnome, like a garden gnome, that shits cocaine. And I wish I was making that up, but that's the actual story. So this redneck girl, she lives in a trailer park. In a poor family and poor environment. She's looking for a side hustle, so she finds this gnome to go sell. But the gnome ends up talking to her and kind of revealing an origin of how this gnome bangs like hot strippers, and these strippers get full on like bare breasted in the movie. Yes, you should know this. So if you're not expecting nudity in this film, you'll get it. And the girl snorts cocaine out of his rectum, okay, in the flashback. And the rest of the story is this little redneck girl. Well, she's not little, she's like a grown woman. She gets this idea to start making the gnome crap out cocaine in whatever ways possible, in some of the most uncomfortable ways, and becomes essentially a drug dealer. Yeah, I can kind of understand where Bruce is coming from, how this might be the most hateable one, because even in terms of messages, I failed to mention this in the first segment, but the twist about internet fame I thought was kind of bordering that smart territory, where that story was kind of saying, hey, look, your 15 seconds of fame is better than no fame at all on the internet being a laughing stock. Here, there's really no discernible message to it. It just exists to be outlandish. And I can't really hold it against it. You know what I mean? I thought the cocaine stuff was batshit and wild. I kind of had fun with it in like a morbid way. And I know you have a totally inverse take on it, but I got the most enjoyability out of this one. And if maybe the whole movie was like this in the first segment and just did a little smaller ones, because this is a 2-hour film, mind you. If they would have cut out the second segment and maybe did a more shorter story like the first and the third one, it might have helped better on the watch. But yeah, it's still not a good story by any means. I think this one I'd probably give like a 2 out of 10, maybe a 3 out of 10 if I'm being feeling generous. And the middle one, I forgot to say that one. I probably give that a 1 out of 10. So what's your thoughts on this cocaine gnome story, Bruce?
I just felt like I heard blasphemy out of your mouth, man. This was by a long shot, and I'm considering the last 2 segments, all right? Okay? You get that, viewer? This is by a just like 1,000-mile radius, all right? This is another planet of bad. Where do I begin? First of all, going back to, I don't want to talk about too much inappropriate stuff, but this is literally like porn. Like, that's what this is at this point. What? You're laughing? That's what it is.
I know exactly what scene you're going to bring up, and I actually legitimately laughed at that scene. That's the only time where the movie got me to legitimately laugh at the absurdity of it. But I know what you're about to say.
let's just begin with like what completionist said, all right? Before we get into that pile of fucking oh god. Okay, first of all, let's go to the stripper thing, I guess we can call it. One of the worst scenes I have ever seen in cinema, and you can tell she is completely I don't want to say anything too harsh here. She is completely naked. All right, she has very little clothing, and it's what you would expect a stripper to wear. All right, it's not even like a bra. It's like just stuff around your chest, I guess. And this gnome, you get to see it. Um, you get to see it do stuff that is just so just awfully just horrible. It's just sad. I mean, at this point, I don't see anyone laughing at this. I just go, what, like, what sick world does this director live in? Because you can tell this, like, very low paid actor is getting, I don't want to say it's too bad, and I'm trying to keep it a little bit PG, but she's getting this gnome basically pressed up against her, private parts to make it look like they're having an intercourse. And it is so just disgusting, and seeing it all happen, I almost had to look away. I'm like, what am I watching right now? The fact that this is in my Tubi watch, I don't even watch Tubi. It makes me embarrassed. Like, I'm not even kidding. I'm like, how can someone watch this? I couldn't even fathom the possibility of owning this thing on a DVD, let alone watching it once on a streaming service, because that was already like one of the first scenes in the whole segment here, and it was also probably one of the worst things in the entire movie. But there's worse. As the segment goes on, I actually had faith in it. I went, okay, fine. This whole cocaine storyline is kind of reminiscent of just some of that really batshit stuff that you'd almost see on the internet back then, with like rainbow unicorns puking up piles of dog crap and just stuff like that. You get the point. You know, that Pop-Tart cat, just stuff like that. Really dumb, but like I can get behind it. And it works well until they go to a restaurant, and the gnome to I can't even remember because it's so forgettable too, besides just the most awful parts, basically gets the waiter, who is extremely feminine, even though he's a guy, all right, he is definitely gay, uh to have sex with him. And the entire time you're like, oh my god, what am I even watching? You don't see anything happen, but then you watch the two walk out. The waiter is all crazed up. It's just disgusting, in my opinion. I can't even laugh at that. And the gnome's like, you gotta do what you gotta do, in this stupid, annoying voice. And it was just so horrible that I thought, there's no way nothing can get worse. It gets worse. Then the gnome, and this little girl that's carrying it, goes to a home, where they ask if he would like to buy cocaine. And he hands them like a $5 bill, hands the girl. And then the gnome's like, what? $5? Because he obviously knows that drugs, people pay up for them. Even I know that. It's like, this little girl's obviously extremely innocent, just doesn't know anything. So he goes in there, he tries to kill it, for like the man, sorry, tries to kill the man, takes back the money, the coke, and then out of nowhere, basically with no context either, the gnome pulls down its pants, and the guy starts, I don't have a better word to say this, but starts eating him out, and trying to like sniff up the cocaine. And just like Sloppy did in the first segment, he is very much in sexual pleasure about it and goes so far because he looks at this guy's like crush, I guess. And I'm not gonna say it here because it's just so out of the world's boundaries. Does something to the picture, and you get to see it all happen. And from what I know, what something looks like, that was real. That was not fake. So, you get all that to happen, and the guy just like wants this guy too, not even the gnome. The guy's like, I want more. And it's so bad. It's just so terrible. That was the worst like minute in cinema I have ever experienced in my entire life. I don't even want to explain what happens because it almost gives me like secondhand embarrassment. It is so bad. And once again, there's nothing to make up for it. So this story just goes along, and while not only having one of the most batshit crazy, uh, I guess, storylines, it just keeps going along while padding out the runtime, making it also pretty boring, but just so shocking that you can't get yourself to be bored because you just saw the worst thing you have ever seen in your life. Think it's funny or not, like you do. You have seen the worst thing ever. I don't care what anyone says. That there's no way something is worse than that in movie history. Where you're like, even though the rest of the movie is fucking boring, let me just say that. Like just the rest of the movie in general, not even just this segment, but you're just still thinking about that. It just like lingers in your mind to the point where you unboring the movie. It's like they use that as a tactic, I guess, to like make people forgive its terribleness. But to me, I saw the issues from the beginning. I'm like, what the hell am I watching? I mean, I cannot get behind that one scene for the life of me. It's just so over the top, so it almost feels like evil had no boundaries there, and it's just shocking that anyone would want to work on this movie in general. Because I'm gonna close out my thoughts there. Movie ends on a really crappy note with this rip off Midnight Society, basically just saying F load of S, all this stuff that's just like super stereotypical. You got this other redneck who's just like really annoying and just starts saying weird words like guitar and just like it's not funny. It That was so insultingly bad that I already was saying this was the worst movie I've ever seen. And that like I don't think I can ever watch another movie where I can say that was worse than Shingles. Like I never can see myself saying that statement. I just cannot. And I don't want to ramble on too long, but I seriously just gotta pressure you guys right now, once again, for the love of ever loving fucking Christ, do not watch this. I mean, I seriously cannot think of anything positive in this whole entire movie. That's my thoughts. I actually, unlike you, I actually got mad while watching this. Combine that with some of the reviewers' comments and all this stuff and all this weird legacy around it, even though it's only a year old. This is easily the worst thing I have ever seen in my life. I guess I'm just gonna close out there. Awful. 0 out of 10 final score. If it wasn't restricted to 0 from 10, I'm not even kidding. This would go near like negative 500 because it was just so bad. I and that's only because of the gnome segment. I think that the first two are terrible, but the gnome one just like it puts that nail in the coffin for the worst thing I could ever experience. You could show me a clip, a 10-second clip of something that people just find so putrid and awful, and I'd probably be like, well, at least I wasn't as bad as Shivers. I mean, Shivers, not Shivers. Shivers is probably good compared to this. Shingles. Shingles. I don't even know what shingles is. Is that like herpes or something?
It's
Like,
like if you had chicken pox and later
uh,
in life they come back, it's called shingles.
oh, great. That's. At least Herpes would have been kind of a funny title. No, Shingles. What? Shingles? It's probably just because their publishing company was like, no, you can't name it Herpes. Even though half of these book titles are so bad, like, I know what you dicked last summer.
I think, okay, here's my final thoughts on the movie to kind of close it out. Okay, when I think of my top 5 worst movies of all time, I'm just going to run them down. You have Master of Disguise, a soul sucking hour and 10, 15 minutes of a comedy movie. It's almost anti comedy. There's nothing funny about it. It's mind numbingly annoying. There's nothing to praise. You have the Garbage Pail Kids movie, which is almost the same boat. It is fucking atrocious. Then you have the top 3 worst that I've seen. This is in there, but this is like right up there with Shane Dawson's Not Cool, and it's also right up there with Creepshow 3. Now, here's the difference between this movie and Shane Dawson's Not Cool and Creepshow 3. Those two formerly were the worst 2 movies I've ever seen for what they were trying to be. And I think part of the reason why I hate them so much is because the creators look like they tried and they failed miserably and made something similar quality to this, which they seem like they didn't try, but they also weren't apologizing for the kind of movie they were making. So I can forgive them a little bit because it reminds me of shit post culture, shit posting memes, shit posting the old style of comedy, or I guess reviewer comedy videos that came out in the late 2000s or early 2010s. That edgelord humor that was prevalent on the internet back then is basically this entire film in a nutshell. There's a reason why a lot of people like James Rolfe, Angry Video Game Nerd, has stepped far back from that over the years, is because they realized themselves how cringy it was. And this, in a lot of ways, is cringy humor to the fucking max, okay? I can't stress this to you. If you're not a fan, or if you, let's say you didn't grow up in the 80s or 90s and you're not used to crass things, this isn't for you. Especially if you did not like the era of YouTube, kind of similar to Shane Dawson. His old skit kind of comedies is essentially these segments in this movie. If you get fuming anger from old Shane Dawson content like that, you're probably going to hate this movie. If you're a massive fan of Goosebumps or Are You Afraid of the Dark and you watch this movie, I can totally understand if you get pissed off. Like, I didn't get pissed off, but I can totally see people that will. You know what I mean? And all in all, I kind of just chalk this movie up as a nothing thing. If I ever think back on it, I'll probably say, yeah, that's one of the worst things I've ever seen. But I don't hate it as much as some other things I've watched in my life. I think I still hate Creepshow 3 more because Creepshow is my favorite and my favorite franchise of all time. And Creepshow 3 not only ruins it in a lot of ways and ruins that streak of just genius it's had over the years, but it's also just so offensively bad that I can't say anything redeemingly about it. Same thing with Not Cool by Shane Dawson. That feels like a long fucking hour and a half long movie of just Shane Dawson skits that weren't funny to begin with back in the day. This is 2 hours long, and the worst sin it has is that it's boring. On top of it being offensively untasteful, anti art, uninteresting, unappealing to the masses, and definitely trying to cater to a niche audience that might accrue them $100,000-$200,000 in profits. Like I said before, I'm not trying to attack the creators of the franchise. I actually kind of want to try the books out and be a customer and maybe give them a shot. But this movie, judging it by its own thing, no offense to the director. I know you had no budget. I know you're adapting source material. But this movie, on its own basis, was atrocious. It's atrocious. No offense to be taken. Please don't take any offense if you're out there watching creators. This is not by any means anything worthwhile. Bruce, you have something you want to add?
I just wanted to ask this and kind of also give my thoughts on the whole Creepshow 3 thing, as once again, that is easily the worst movie I've seen besides this. And that is, yes, it ruins a legacy. Alright, it feels like they tried. But here's the thing. Alright, completionists, you gotta stick with me here. If you removed the whole legacy part. Because honestly, these Shingles books have a legacy for being like pretty awful. Most people say, from what I've seen online, at least. Don't count my word for that. They might be great. I don't know. I cannot say any words on that because I've not read them, and honestly, I have no desire after watching this. But back to what I was saying. Move the legacy part from your rating. Uh, I'm saying Creepshow 3. Um, remove the whole they tried, because they might not have, if we're being real here. I mean, it's very bad. Um, and then what would you say? Is this worse than uh any movie you've ever seen? You know, like I feel like if you're judging it on its own merit, it is so bad that I just cannot. I don't even know how. I mean, I've seen all the movies you said were worse than this. I don't think I could say those were worse. I just don't. I that's of course my own opinion, but if you're looking at it for its own reasons without, the whole it tried kind of thing, because if we're being honest, this almost kind of tried. Why would they make this? In my own opinion here. I just feel like why would they make this? They obviously wanted to try something. Of course it's not as much trying as Creepshow 3, for example, because that actually had a budget. That actually had a writing crew, you know.
Well,
But
I can answer your question. Here, let me go ahead and answer it. It's because of one factor about this movie is that it's aware. I think it's aware of what it is, and we can sit here and say, well, just because it's aware doesn't make it any less terrible. No, I do agree it's a terrible movie, but it's at least aware with what it is. It's a super low budget movie. They're unapologetic for it. You can look at what they did to the props of the monsters. They're literally just a garden gnome you can go buy for $10. It's a dummy you can buy on Amazon for $20. They didn't try. And you can tell by the way it's written, by the way it's laid out, it's kind of like a skit. It's playing, it's kind of making fun of itself almost a little bit. It knows what it is and it's aware. And because of that, I get this feel like it's done on purpose. They're doing this on purpose. The other movies, they don't feel like that. Creepshow 3 does not feel like it's terrible on purpose. Neither does Not Cool. They actually feel like they were trying desperately to be something and they just couldn't be what they were trying to be or anywhere close to it. This movie is trying to be what it is. And what it is terrible, but at least it's trying to be that, which I can commend more than other movies, which is why I said what I said. But that's just my thought process on it.
yeah.
And that makes any sense. It's still in the bottom 5 worst things I've ever seen. Don't get me wrong. It's down there, man. It's the bottom of the barrel in terms of films that I've seen. Even though there are some movies that I have an inkling could be its close second cousins that I've actually seen on Tubi that I might actually watch, because if you can make it through this movie, I think you can literally watch any film out there. You can watch anything if you can watch this kind of film, and that's saying a lot, because this is honestly I think the most low budget thing I've ever watched in my life,
Oh
and that's
yeah,
saying a lot too.
easily.
And apparently Skinamarink was made with less money. And I've seen that too. And that's also one of my worst movies of all time. I hate that movie deeply. So, you know,
And I'd like to add my perspective on this just really fast, and then we can kind of close out this very epic review, I guess. And that is, put this in my perspective, all right, guys? If I wasn't doing this for a review, because we saw this thing and we just knew we'd have to review it, all right? That's literally our mindset here. Um, we, I would have literally left that movie in 10 minutes max. That's saying I was actually like, not totally appalled by the very opening little gag, which is just really stupid. I would have canceled this thing almost as soon as it reached his hands in my ass. And the thing that I think is just hilarious, you know, is that, spoiler alert, this was going to be on the Goose Junkies podcast, all right? And a good number of members of the podcast refused to watch it. They would not watch this movie because it was just that bad. So you're seeing it here. We're the only two people, I think. There might have been one more. I think Alex might have watched it after us, but we were the only two people that were committed to finish this thing and didn't give up. And we nearly did, like 10 times. So that's just my thoughts. Once again, overall rating 0 out of 10, not even a chance. But I hope the director is doing better things now. I know that was only a year ago, but I don't want to be mean, but it's like I feel like you kind of have to try a little harder. I mean, I totally respect what you were trying to do here. It just did not work at all for me. Nothing really stuck the landing. So yeah, that's my final little bit.
My final ranking for this film, because I don't give films a 0 out of 5. Even like the bottom of the barrel, maybe throw like a 0.5. This is kind of like a 0.5 point, like maybe a 1 out of 5, because I'm not that mean. And I don't mean any disrespect. Like I've already reiterated this. I don't mean any disrespect to the cast and crew on this film, or the creative team. Obviously, you guys made 60 books. You have a fan base out there on Amazon. People buy your stuff, and you have some sort of reputation out there, and you probably do have fans. You didn't make me a fan with this movie though, and this was the first thing I ever came across in your IP. Like I said, I kind of want to try one or two of the books, and if they're like this, I'm just gonna. It's not for me. But I'm not gonna sit here and say that you shouldn't watch something. But would I recommend you watch it? No, because I don't think many people would understand just on three different things: how low budget this movie is. There's next to no production or acting value there because of the budget, I feel. And the third thing is subjectivity. I don't think this is anything for a mass audience to consume. This is definitely a niche, very niche market of a film. And there's defenders out there. If you defend this movie, good for you. You're among the few that are the clientele and the demographic they're trying to go for here. But that's just where I'm at with it. So there's that. So yeah, that's our thoughts on Shingles the movie. Let us know down in the comment section if you enjoyed this review. Did you agree? Did you not agree? What did you think about it? Do you hate it? Do you love it? We're dying to know. Also, I'm going to put Goosebumps enthusiasts information in the description and in the comment section of this video. Please go sub them up and show them some support. Like always, take care. We hope to see you next time. Have a good day.